Alright, this is going to be a little addendum to my global warming video. A couple times in that video I referred to the so-called global warming alarmists, and I wanted to qualify and explain that a little bit. Um, the uh, the main reason that I would even make it, I mean, the climate's kind of an interesting thing. Earth science is an interesting thing and worthwhile of study, but I wouldn't make a video about it unless there was a political movement to um, exploit the science for the benefit mostly of the state, but also for wealthy people in control of the state, or at least with influence within the state. Um, I think Michael Crichton said it pretty well. The guy who wrote Jurassic Park. There's actually some videos of him giving testimony to Hillary Clinton, of all people, in Congress. He's dead now, but he said this before, that he compared the global warming fanatics to a religion, and he actually said it parallels Christianity quite a bit, because they have a notion of an ideal state of the world where everything is perfect, like the Garden of Eden, and then this is destroyed by man, and Christians would say, original sin. The environmentalists would say it's from pollution. Um, Now, this is silly. There is no Garden of Eden on Earth. There's no point where we say, okay, this is the ideal. This is what the Earth ought to be like, and look how we've deviated from it. I mean, you can pick a time and note the differences. That's easy, but you can't pick which time. Is it the Miocene? Is it the Pliocene? Is it the Pleistocene? Is it the KT boundary? Is it sometime in the Paleozoic era? Is it in the Carboniferous time period, or the Ordovician, or the Devonian, or the Neolithic, the Mesolithic, or the Paleolithic? There's no. Is it more recent? Is it just before the onset of the Industrial Revolution? Is it before the Renaissance? Is it right when the Roman Empire? I mean, there's no. Not only is there not any kind of consensus on when this should be, there's no way to even come to that conclusion, so they don't. But they still believe, and there's this dire problem, even though they can't quantify what effect we're having, and they can't qualify it, and there's nothing you can say that will change their mind, typically, because they just okay. I think there's two kinds of environmentalists. And this is true of all pro-government movements, really. You have a couple people who are extremely rich and extremely powerful, who view it as something that they can exploit, something that will benefit them. And they have political power and political influence, and they're the ones who get legislation passed, get new regulations, and they're the ones who benefit from it. So the carbon exchange scheme that Al Gore promotes so much would make him into a billionaire, in addition to being extremely powerful. Now, that's not to say he doesn't actually believe it. I don't know. There's no way actually to know. But there's no way he can disassociate the fact that it will empower him from any sincere belief he has in it. And he's not the only one. There's quite a few people. Now, then there are all the masses of people who aren't really going to gain anything from it, but they're duped into believing that it's a worthy cause. Usually, the way that works is you convince somebody that their problems are a result of this, and that if they only support whatever legislation, their problems will be solved. And that also has a kind of I don't want to say apocalyptic, but um, what's the word? Just a perfect ending, a paradise, a heaven, and they uh, fall for it, and then they support these programs, but they're not the ones who actually get them passed. They're just the cover. And of course, that second group outnumbers the first group by quite a bit, but they're not the ones who get anything done, really. They feel good about it, and they give it cover, but they don't actually make it happen. Um, the the politically powerful ones, there are a lot of people who are aware of this. Exactly how you characterize it's not important. There are some people who think it's a very uh, integrated, highly coordinated conspiracy. I tend to think that there's probably some level of conspiracy just because it's very hard actually for uh, people to cooperate without there being at least some. Um, so the the part of the reason we know that it's not really about environment and that the main impetus is political power is that the the solution always hinges on additional political power. So nobody comes forth and says, well, if we just got rid of the government or reduced the government or reduced regulations or whatever, uh, and that would help. They never ever advocate that. They always come from, if only the government and whatever corporations it wishes to enrich had more power and more sway, then that would solve the problem. And the litmus test here is, would do they, if they really cared about, quote, the environment, then they would at least be willing to hear the possibility that maybe state control isn't the best way to change things, and they never are. Uh, Among libertarians, they understand about private property and all that, and how that can help the government, and they'll obviously go for it. Someone who's just a hardcore environmentalist will never ever go for that. If they ever do, it's because they become a libertarian first, and then they'll go for it. And I mean, I know a guy who's like that. I mean, I had a friend. He was actually an anarcho-syndicalist, but he was way into the environment. I mean, like the kind of guy who actually goes homeless for months at a time and lives in the woods, and you know, and I couldn't touch him with the private property solutions to the environment problems. That wasn't going to fly. But I got him on the political libertarianism, and after he got into that for a while, then he actually came back on his own to the correct solution. But most of them, that's never going to happen, because the the true push here is just for more power, more government power. There's lots of things the government does or claims needs to increase its own power. The biggest one, of course, is defense. Like, we need them because uh, it's dangerous if they're not protecting us, and they usually need to make some enemy. And so it used to be communism. Before that, it was fascism, and now it's terrorism. And uh, I think that they'd like this environmental one to work, because it's something that if they could really get it sold to people, uh, you're basically telling people you need to be protected from your own exhaling, because they're telling us that CO2 is a poisonous gas. CO2 is just part of the atmosphere, and it's an extremely vital part of the atmosphere. Now, that's not to say the ratio of CO2 in the atmosphere is irrelevant, because it's not. But I don't know, if you look in the number one producers of CO2, humans aren't anywhere close to the top of the list. That's not to say even a small change can't change it, but actually, the way the biosphere works is an increase in CO2 just means plants absorb more of it. It doesn't mean that there's more CO2 and it just sits there. And life is adaptable, and it changes as it has continuously. There's no point where life just said, "Oh, we got it down." Anyway, uh, the only reason it's worth making a video about is because it's being used for the benefit of the state and to all of our detriment. The taxes that are proposed and are asked for are, it seems to me like it's almost insane, because they're so high that they would like destroy society, or at least have that potential. And then there, of course, there are the dictatorial powers that state wants. One thing that in general environmentalists are advocating is the complete abolition of property rights. I mean, right now we kind of have this rhetorical support for property rights. Now, in principle, the state kind of supersedes all that most of the time. But this is a complete, let's just get rid of the idea. The state needs to have managerial power over everything, or else we're all going to die in a flood or drought. It's interesting, yeah, you hear them both. We're all going to be killed in floods and droughts, as if that even makes any sense. You might as well say we're all going to die of a perpetual night and a perpetual day. It's not possible. It's logically impossible. But that's why, it's important to point out that the main movers and shakers in this aren't people who watched Captain Planet as a kid and, pioneered into the legislative process. It's extremely wealthy and powerful people who think that they're going to gain from it, and the state is going to gain from it. The state has already passed a lot of legislation in the name of environmentalism, and they'll continue to do more. Fortunately, I think this meme has lost some of its luster, and it's still pretty powerful, but it's getting a little bit weaker, and I hope that trend continues.